Welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. I am so excited to welcome back Alicia D. Williams to the show. Last year, we talked about picture books and STEAM. This year, we're going to talk about her new book, which is coming out this month, Midair. If you have not bought a copy of Midair, I want you to rush out right now, pause the podcast, pre order the book, and then come back and join us for this conversation because it's that good. Alicia, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back again.
I am so happy to have you here. If people want to know more about you and sort of the picture books, I'm going to tell them to go back to last year's conversation because we're going to focus on all new stuff this year. Let's talk about Midair. Tell us about this beautiful book. What prompted the writing of it?
There were two things that prompted the writing of it. One, at the success of Genesis Begins Again, I was afraid. I was struggling with fear. How do I do that? What did I even do? Can I do it again? People are going to expect the same thing. And it took me for a while to figure out how to write another book of that magnitude. And once I battled fear, I was able to prove to myself that yes, I could write another book. So that was one inspiration. I had to prove to myself that I could write another book. The second was I was struggling so much with during the pandemic and the social justice unrest of 2020 and 2021. I was grappling with the world and how we don't view boys the same way as we view girls. We don't show them any grace. So I want to understand how come with all these different events happening over and over again, how come we couldn't see little black boys as little black boys? Why did they have to be, thugs or criminals first? So in that examination, blossomed midair, and it actually tackled more than I was hoping for or expecting to tackle.
Well, let's start with the idea of fear because Isaiah, your central character, he's gripped by so much fear in terms of, the terrible things that happen that sort of lead him to having to confront society, but also just the fears of being an eighth grade boy who's trying to find his authentic self, to find a way to show himself in the world. Talk a little more about Isaiah. He is probably one of the most captivating characters I've read in years.
Isaiah is, how can I say this? Because we like to categorize boys into this one big clump, and we don't allow them to be different. So Isaiah is different. And when you read a lot of the books, we kind of fall into a category of how they might sound, how they might act, and their hobbies. And Isaiah debunks all of that. He is a black boy who is sensitive. And not just he's a black boy, he's a boy who's sensitive. He's a boy who's gentle. He's a boy who likes rock and roll, which is not necessarily a black genre. He's a boy who loves plant life. So I experienced with Isaiah this sensitive soul, and I wanted to put him on the page expressing that. And because of the fear, we expect boys to all be tough, right? We expect them to do every stunt. We expect them to sometimes subscribe to the masculine toxicity. And he doesn't. He doesn't. So that fear is genuine. How can a boy like Isaiah exist in a world where if you paint your nails, which is nothing but an accessory, it's an attack on your masculinity, your gender identity. If you like to plant, then something's wrong with you. So I want to explore that with Isaiah.
And I thought that you also sort of carried that through to Drew as well, his best friend at the start of the book. Drew could easily fall into so many stereotypes, and he doesn't. He's also operating from a sense of trying to figure out who he is and how he fits in and sort of this pain. And they share a common loss, but they approach it very differently.
Right. So you have these three boys. best friends. Darius is the first one, and Isaiah. That friendship is solidified. And when tragedy happens and Darius is no longer in the picture, and you are left with the other two best friends, Drew and Isaiah, they're both struggling with grief. But you're right. I figured that Drew, coming from a more urban setting into the suburban setting, one, he has to adjust. But it parallels Isaiah because Isaiah gives him a sense of calm. Isaiah gives him a sense of peace. And Isaiah and Darius offer this innocence that he isn't able to have. In his environment, he has to be tough. He is exposed to realistic events that happen in the world where Isaiah is kept in a kind of a bubble, right? And so he is able to just escape to Isaiah's world and just be a kid, whether it's using his imagination, watching anime movies or martial arts movies, he can just be. But he has to play this dual relationship of balancing how not to be such a kid and to be sensitive, but to also be, have the weight of the world on his shoulders. He has to take care of his brother who has sickle cell. He has to take care of his mom. He has all these responsibilities. So with Drew, you're right. He keeps this in, right? He handles it much differently than Isaiah.
Yeah. And I loved the balance between the two boys. Do you have a passage you want to share before we move further into talking about the book?
Yes, I want to share because speaking on the sensitivity, one of the big parts of this book that I want to explore, not just why boys can't have to, why boys, not just why boys have to be tough. I want to explore why boys are not encouraged to be their full selves and to explore, but girls can be tough and they can be sweet. And we encourage girls to have girl power, to be a firefighter, do whatever. But boys, that is not what boys do. So I want to challenge that. And so I want to read a little bit about that experience. Pause. Mom and I fall back, letting our bodies be swallowed up by recliners for our Sunday afternoon movie ritual. Last time it was my choice, Spider-Man. Yeah, again. Today's hers. She sifts through at least 100 movies in her save list while ragging about my hair getting out of control. Psh, it's her to watch list that's out of control. People think you're a thug, she says. It's not that bad, I assure her. Besides, think I'm going for a Basquiat look. She squints at me. Which one? I sneeze. Mom reminds me to take my allergy meds. I'm not a baby, I remind her. You're my baby, she reminds me. I'm burning to ask if Dad's renewing his job, but she'll give me the, you've been listening to my conversations look. Then it'll get serious when I just want to chill. Mom chooses the photograph. 5 minutes in, I can tell it's not going to be funny. She paints her nails and says how cute the guy lead is. Says his hair is nice too. Mom, I groan. Now she's got me thinking about my hair and Drew's cut, which reminds me to ask her for parental permission for our mission, Guinness rules. Sure, but what will you two be doing exactly? She holds up her hand, admiring. Haven't figured that out, but we're working on it. Nice, I compliment her nails. The color is the deepest purple I've ever seen. Purple so deep, it could have been siphoned from the galaxy. Purple so purple, Prince would have written a song about it. Purple so black, it looks like magic. The polish is slick on her nails like honey. I joke she could shoot sparkles from her fingertips, already imagining the flames I shoot from mine. Just as quick, 7-year-old me comes crashing in Mom's heels, stomping all over with, he gotta be tough enough, Kay. Mom, I hesitate. You think it'd be weird if I tried polish? She pauses, a pause so small, I don't think she even realizes it. No, not at all. But was her pause the real answer? Lessons. Mom once told me she always wanted a girl to teach her to be brave, bold, and fierce. That's what she told me. but God saw fit to take away one of my X chromosomes, turn it Y. Guess those lessons weren't meant for me.
Wow. That really is powerful. And, as I'm listening, I'm realizing that the parents are also conflicted. The parents are central to the story and they're beautifully written. I mean, I love the relationship that they have and the love that they carry for Isaiah. But clearly, they're also struggling as how do we parent this sensitive boy? Where did you draw the inspiration for the parents?
I drew a lot from me and the overprotectiveness I have for my daughter, but also the same protectiveness that I have. So many other mothers are having that, and so many other fathers are experiencing that too. How do we manage to keep our children innocent for as long as possible? As an educator, I saw that with parents. Like, I just want them to just not worry about what's going on in the world, to just be a kid. That stuff can wait. So balancing this idea of I want you to be a kid, but I also want to kind of prepare you that people will judge you how they see you. People will want to attack you because of these things. And so it's a fine balance that we all have to walk. The idea of protection versus putting what you need, the armor that you need to survive in this world, and trying to figure out what is the proper age group to prepare them to burst that bubble of protection.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. And because he is so protected, I wanted this family to be one of love as well as struggle. So mom is living her best life as a plant stylist, planting, uh, uh, digging into plants, but also styling people homes, and that's a rare career, right? And
Right.
dad is uh, didn't make it into the book, but he's a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist. And because dad's bubble has been burst a long time ago, and he has taken so many pictures of death that his story parallels Isaiah's as well.
Yeah.
So I needed them to know what it's like because we do as parents, we know exactly what it's like.
Yep.
We just want to oh, I just want you to be my baby for a little longer. I want you to just be my baby.
No, that makes sense. And you and I had been talking about our own daughters before we got on this call, and, they're about the same age. They're in that 24, 25 range. And, I think that this generation has gone through so much. From the moment they were babies, there's always been a crisis. And it's hard not to want to put your arms around them and protect them and say it's going to be okay, even though we can't make that promise at this point that it's going to be okay.
Right. There is no way that we even know for ourselves that it's going to be okay. We watch the news and we know what's going on, not just in this world, but all over. A few years ago, it was during the pandemic. And this that age group is definitely on TikTok. They're on social media. And mental health was definitely destroyed for a lot and it's still being controlled.
Yes.
And the anxiety is all at an all-time rate, so as well as suicide rates. But I recall my daughter calling me at 3 a.m. and that's the only reason why I keep my phone on. 3 a.m. She had a full-blown panic attack, and I'm having to calm her down through the phone, calm down. And she was like, is there anywhere we can go and be safe? Is there anywhere in the world that we can be safe? And you want to say yes, but everywhere, everywhere there's something. So you're right. And Isaiah and Drew and Darius, they have to face their world isn't always safe. Their world isn't always safe. And how do we as parents, and we know that if we could just protect them, if we could just hold on to them, even if they're a million miles away, if we could just be that parent, but we know we don't have that kind of control.
Right.
We don't have that kind of power. And it's just, it keeps us in anguish and it keeps them, we try to protect them of our own fears, right? It's a
Exactly.
juggle.
Well, and all we can do is prepare them the very best we possibly can and then be there to love them no matter what. And I don't want to spoil the book because, it's so powerful, but I love the way that you sort of bring particularly Dad and Isaiah full circle. And there's just this beautiful moment. You kind of allude to it in terms when you read the passage just now about there was that moment when Dad said, "You've got to be tough." And then it has this gorgeous arc where they're both able to be vulnerable and to grow through that. And I thought that was rare and wonderful because you might see that more often in fiction in a mother son relationship. And to see that with the
Mhm.
father was truly special. It kind of gave me some hope.
It does give me hope because those fathers exist.
They
You
do.
always see, you could see and easily remember the ones who are always hard, the ones who, that, stories, as storytellers, it's easy to always stay there because that's what we see. You can't have any weakness. You can't be feminine. You can't be this. I need you to be a man. There are those fathers who you'll occasionally see that reminds you, yes, they're there, that says it's okay to show your emotions. It's okay to cry. You have feelings. It's okay. And I see that now more often. I saw a video of a teacher talking about his student saying, he was crying. He was like, hey, hey, toughen up. And his student said, I'm allowed to have feelings. And it just clicked with him like, oh, I've been perpetuating this. And yes, he's right to have feelings. So I wonder if we're having an awakening as well, that our young, that generation, this young generation, because they have been through so much, they're more in touch with their feelings where we weren't allowed to have any feelings,
Exactly.
right?
No, I think you're 100% right about that. That I think they're more sensitive to their feelings. And I do see not all men, but I'm seeing more men sort of be able to connect to and break through that programming. I mean, if I could see my 81-year-old father do that, I have faith that everybody can do that. And I've seen him break through years and years of that kind of programming, the being the military officer and serving in Vietnam and just the layers upon layers of stuff. And he's now one of the most sensitive guys I know. And I'm like, okay, it's possible. I've seen it
Yeah.
with my own husband and kind of the work he's done to be a better father to our girls. And I think that it is possible, but I think this generation has it figured out so much more than we did,
You're right. You're right.
which which is hopeful. And I loved the fact also, I'm a North Carolina girl myself, so I do love the fact that you send Isaiah home to North Carolina at one point in the book. And I loved his aunt and uncle, and I could just 100% put myself in that environment. I pictured a North Carolina summer, and again, I love the diversity of experiences and relationships you brought into that because it's a totally different socioeconomic community than what Isaiah's growing up in. But he
Mhm.
finds a way to conquer his fears and to find a sense of who he is down there. And I loved that contrast. What made you decide to shift him out of his suburban home and send him to North Carolina?
Yes, I was playing with parallels in this book. And I think that was the biggest thing. I wrote, so in many other drafts, dad was struggling with other things. Like he being a photojournalist, he had seen so much. And he needed to get away. And I didn't want him to go away and mom be angry. I wanted to show how a family looks when they support each other as well as through their mental health issues. Dad needed to get away, so he took a job, which will make a sacrifice for the family to, hey, you're going to be without me. But he needed to get himself together and be in a different environment to see the world from a different view. And that is a hard move to say, I need healing. So I need to take myself out and, like you say, reprogram myself, right? Drew does this too. He has to escape his home life and the realities of his world. And he goes to Isaiah's house and Darius's house because he need peace to think, to just be, and to let things go, right? I played with that. And how would that look like for Isaiah? Where could he go? And it just made sense because you hear this throughout history that, oh, I sent my kids away for the summer and they come back a different kid. You're like, oh my gosh, you changed so much. You're taller, you've grown. That being away from your mom and dad who have, sheltered you and kept you safe and reminded you to do all the things like when you send them off to camp. Don't forget to change your underwear. Don't forget to brush your teeth. Don't forget to put on deodorant, right?
Yep.
You're not there to do that. They have to become solely independent. They have to, even with an aunt and uncle who love them, it's not the same as a mom and dad.
Yeah.
So that to me was like, that is exactly what he needs. He needs to find his own way with the love and support of family, but not someone who's going to remind them to do every single thing and point out his mistakes as well as what he did, right. That is the genesis of the parallels and him becoming who he is and heal from what he's gone through.
Well, I thought it worked beautifully. And the other thing I was thinking as I was reading this, you wrote this as a novel in verse. And in my mind, that is probably the single hardest way to write for middle grade. But when it works, you know, Kwame Alexander, Jackie Woodson, Jason Reynolds, and you make this an art form that you don't realize you're reading poetry. You're just reading a good story, but boy, you get a lot of bang for your buck with the words. How did you go about sort of taking this story and putting it into such a beautiful form?
I promise you, I am sitting here silently thanking you. So now that you gave me pause to speak, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I I was just thinking how I didn't grow up really reading poetry. It was intimidating. It was not accessible. The words and the imagery I couldn't relate to. And probably what they gave me or what I was exposed to was just too hard for my palate at the time.
Yep.
Had I had novels in verse, I probably would have grown to love not just poetry, but to learn how to read and imagine at a more earlier age than later coming
Yes.
to it. So coming to this book, I did not intend to write a novel in verse. I did not intend to write a novel in verse. I wrote it as prose. I put it out, but initially I had Isaiah become more quiet. He became inward. So he wasn't speaking a lot. You might see that a little bit in his second journey down south, but throughout he wasn't speaking. So I got off the computer and got a pad and a notebook. I mean, a notebook and a pencil. And that's when it came out in a different form, like a staccato way of speaking. And the rhythm came out so differently. And I thought, what am I doing here? Is this what I think it is? And as I continued to commit to the process, it just flowed, not intentionally. I think he dictated how his story needed to be told. And I am so grateful to whatever higher power that it works because I think that was my biggest fear because I did not grow up reading this genre. I know I studied this genre as an author. I pulled every book off the shelf. Like, what are the rules? I'm looking at blogs, I'm looking at craft. There are no rules.
Which
But
is
I
what makes
knew,
it work.
ah, that makes it, thank you. There are no rules. Like, how do you do dialogue? What do you do? But I think it's just to hear that is just mind blowing for me and affirming to me as a storyteller.
Well, I loved it, and I agree with you. I grew up on probably the same poetry you did. It was the let's overanalyze it and it became intimidating, and I didn't love poetry. And even when I did my doctorate, my advisor pushed me to look at poetry with little kids. And I'm thinking, seriously, you're going to make me live with poetry? But I'm so glad she did, because what I discovered then was that young people love language and they love playing with language. And it's really, if you can have fun with it and you present it not in a b c d way, they're going to go with it. They love it when you're engaged, when there's that emotional tug to it. And I think that what you're doing and what other authors who are doing the novel in verse are doing is you're making it so accessible at such a younger age. And maybe you're unleashing a whole generation of poets for us for the coming years.
Wouldn't that be great? We need more.
We need more
We
poets in our
need
lives.
more. I wonder if you were like me, that I know we didn't have poetry, but what I did have back in the day, cassette tapes and albums that gave you the
Yes,
lyrics. And I would read the lyrics. Maybe that was that
I
poetry,
did the
you
same thing.
know. Yes.
Yeah, the album covers and the CDs and the tapes where you'd open them up and you had like the long index cards
Yes.
with the lyrics.
That was our poetry.
It was, but we didn't realize that. And, everybody did that. And we were experimenting with poetry. We just didn't realize it.
Yes, that was if they gave me more of that, perhaps, right? But now that we have it in a book, you're right. Maybe we are creating a whole new generation of storytellers that can not only just, who would have thought this would have existed, right?
Yeah.
When we were kids, that they can take it and make more of it, and to flip it around, because they always change what we do, and they can expand on the form. That would be exciting as well.
Well, and what I love is seeing how that form has developed just in the last like 10, 15 years. And it truly crosses genres. And that's what's exciting about it. So, bravo for having created something that's going to be, I think, another touchstone within that canon. I really think that middle grade teachers and readers everywhere are going to gravitate to this book. I'm putting my money on it for award season, so you heard it here first.
Oh, no, don't scare me yet. But it's this is the most frightful thing, because you just, when you're online, you're very vulnerable, because everyone's posting their star reviews, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a star, or oh my gosh. And I realized that people receive the book depending on their mood, depending on their history, depending on their beliefs and biases. And so I do know that every book is not for everyone, but it is my hope that this book is great in its way for those people who want to read it, and it really hits them and triggers in them whatever they need, and they hear and read whatever they need to be their best selves, whether it's healing, whether it's inspiration, whether it's joy. I want that for, that's my wish for the books.
Oh, I love that. So I'm going to shift for just the last little bit we've got. And I just wanted to ask, I see you've got post-it notes on the wall behind you. What are we working on now?
You're very clever. I say, it's so far back you can't see all of this, but yeah, I am on a roll now. I am on a roll. For several years ago, I started a story, and it was dealing, and I guess I'm one of those writers who would just deal with so much in my head, trying to understand it, things that are making me angry, things I want to bring voice to. And I wonder if this is my way to be an activist, because I know that I am not the one to march in the street. I don't have that crowds. I can't do the crowds or whatever. So we all have a place. And I want to be able to say, this is what I did. This is my contribution. So I started out with a story that was dealing with gentrification, and where are the people going that are being put out? And I see it a lot here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Sure.
And I was just trying to figure out what would that look like. And it morphed into something more. It started with basketball, a girl who played basketball and her community was changing. And oh my gosh, The Hate You Give came out. And I was like, oh no, I can't have basketball because she's a basketball player, even though it could be more than one
Right.
but a basketball. I don't know what I was thinking. I just didn't want to be called a copycat, I guess. And I put the book away, and this is way before Genesis came out. And it just in the last few years, I picked it back up again, and I thought I discovered with everything that's going on, the history of our people in the swimming pools. So it is about a ragtag team of swimmers and a connection to the historical past of swimming and the prevention of swimming.
Well, I can't wait to see that one. And we'll have you back on the podcast when your new book comes out. But in
Yes.
the meantime, I want everybody to run out and seriously pre order Mid-Air. It's coming out later this month, and it's such an amazing book. Alicia, thank you so much for joining us on the Adventures in Learning podcast today. It has been such a treat to catch up with you.
Thank you so much for having me once again.